Jason Patrick Baldwin, widely recognized as Jason Hawk from History Channel's Mountain Men, passed away on January 28, 2025, at his home surrounded by loved ones.
When Jason Hawk's family and friends gathered at his Arkansas forge after his passing in January 2025, they came to honor a master craftsman. What they discovered among the tools and steel wasn't mysterious or supernatural, it was something far more powerful. In the journals, unfinished blades, and carefully arranged workspace, they found evidence of a life dedicated to preserving ancient skills and passing knowledge to the next generation. The real discovery? That true legacy isn't forged in steel alone. In late January 2025, a forge in Arkansas fell silent. Jason Hawk, known to millions from History Channel's Mountain Men, had passed at 49, surrounded by family. But in his workshop at Outlaw Forge Works, they discovered he had been building not just knives, but a legacy that would outlive him. Who was Jason Hawk before television cameras captured his work? What shaped the man who would inspire thousands to pick up hammer and steel? The man behind the blade. Jason grew up in a family that valued creativity, skill, and independence. His mother, Andrea Baldwin, was an artist and equine therapist who brought creativity and connection to nature into her children's lives. His father, Jim Baldwin, served in the Army Special Forces before becoming a carpenter and artist. Jim later adopted the surname Hawk to honor his skydiving years, a name that spoke to freedom, independence, and soaring above convention. Jason grew up alongside his brother Damon and sisters Jordan Baldwin, Jill Lott, Jimmy Jogan, and Julie Waller Driscoll. The family instilled in him values that would define his life: the importance of working with your hands, the value of self-reliance, and the belief that quality matters more than convenience. Jason's path took him through Montana's Bob Marshall Wilderness, where he learned to live in remote conditions and understand what it meant to depend on your own skills. He later settled in Arizona, first in Rimrock, then Arivaca, building his reputation as a bladesmith while developing Outlaw Forge Works. His craft became more than a profession, it was a way of life. Jason worked with high-carbon steels and Damascus, creating blades that were functional, beautiful, and built to last generations. Each knife reflected his understanding that a well-made tool is a connection between maker and user, between past and present.
It's a landmark day at Jason Hawk's Mountain Forge.
I'm working on something that I've dreamed about for a long time. The first knife that is...
But Jason wasn't just a craftsman working in isolation. He married Mary Friccione in October 2014, though they had been together since around 2008. Jason also had two previous marriages, first to Erin Meeks in Montana and later to Ikuko Watanabe, a Japanese student who became the mother of his son Kamui, born in 2005. His daughters River, born in 2008, and Madeline Rose completed his family. Jason also pursued martial arts with the same dedication he brought to bladesmithing. He earned a 5th-degree black belt in Doc Pares Eskrima under Grandmaster Christopher Petrelli. For Jason, martial arts and bladesmithing were connected as both required discipline, respect for tradition, patience, and the understanding that mastery takes years of dedicated practice. But how does a craftsman working quietly in the Arizona desert reach millions of viewers? What happens when Hollywood discovers authenticity in an age of manufactured reality? From desert forge to television. Jason first appeared on television in 2014 on History Channel's No Man's Land, giving viewers a glimpse into his world.
Bring in these lovely chickens and introduce them to their new glorious home. All right, so River?
Yeah.
When the network began casting for Mountain Men in 2016, they found Jason again. They had actually filmed him in Arizona earlier, but that footage never aired. Instead, they invited him to join Season 5 of Mountain Men, which meant relocating his family and forge to Arkansas. The move represented more than just geography. It was a commitment to sharing his knowledge with a wider audience. Jason didn't change who he was for television. The cameras simply captured what he would have been doing anyway, forging blades, teaching his children, living deliberately according to his values. Through his appearances on Mountain Men, millions of viewers watched Jason work at his forge. They saw him explain heat treatment and blade geometry, demonstrate traditional techniques, and show that old skills weren't just historical curiosities, but practical tools for self-reliance. The show resonated because there was no manufactured drama or scripted conflict. Jason's segments were about a man doing work he loved, in a place he'd chosen, according to values he refused to compromise. In a world where so much feels out of control, there was something deeply appealing about watching someone with such complete mastery over his craft. What drove Jason to share his knowledge so freely? Why did he believe teaching was as important as creating? The teacher's mission. Jason understood something crucial about craftsmanship. It dies when it's not passed on. Skills that took millennia to develop can vanish in a single generation if no one teaches them, if no one learns them, if no one cares enough to keep the flame alive. He taught at the Winter Count Knife Show and Woodsmoke Gathering, demonstrating techniques and explaining the why behind the how. He'd discuss why carbon content matters.
The design of this knife is just my version of an early Saxon knife. It's really an all-purpose steel.
Why certain steels perform differently. Why traditional methods still produce superior results. Jason took on apprentices and students who wanted to truly learn the craft. He taught them that bladesmithing isn't about taking a weekend workshop or watching online tutorials. It's about time, repetition, failure, and persistence. It's about understanding that mastery is measured in years and decades, not days and weeks. The bladesmithing community can be insular, with established craftsmen sometimes guarding their techniques as trade secrets. Jason took the opposite approach. He believed that a rising tide lifts all boats, that by helping others improve their craft, he strengthened the entire tradition. A thriving community of skilled bladesmiths was better for everyone than a handful of masters hoarding knowledge. His teaching philosophy reflected his broader values. In an era of instant gratification and planned obsolescence, Jason believed that some things shouldn't be rushed, that quality matters more than quantity, that there's dignity in work done well regardless of whether anyone is watching. But what happens when a man who has spent his life mastering control faces something he cannot control? How does a craftsman confront an enemy that yields to neither skill nor determination? The battle he couldn't win. Around 2020 or 2021, Jason received devastating news, a diagnosis of stage 4 squamous cell cancer.
You don't find a plane every day. This is neat. I'll be damned. The seat, flaps.
At an age when he should have had decades ahead of him, with young daughters who still needed their father, Jason faced an enemy that didn't respect skill, determination, or willpower. The financial burden was immediate and crushing. Mary organized a GoFundMe campaign to help with mounting medical bills and living expenses, setting a goal of $130,000. The community responded, raising over $36,000. But it wasn't enough to cover the costs of fighting advanced cancer. Jason underwent aggressive treatments, fighting to see his children grow up, to continue his work, and maintain some normalcy. For a time, it seemed like the treatments might work. He returned to his knife shop when his strength allowed, continuing to forge blades, to teach, to create. But cancer is relentless. By July 2024, Jason faced the harsh reality that the disease had progressed beyond what medicine could cure. He was offered palliative chemotherapy, but Jason made a choice that reflected his deepest values. He opted for in-home hospice care instead, prioritizing quality of life over quantity. When he had the strength, he still worked in his knife shop. The forge remained his sanctuary, the place where he had always found peace and purpose. Even in his final months, steel and fire called to him. Mary provided updates to the community that had supported them. sharing the heartbreaking reality of watching her husband, her best friend, her partner in everything, slowly fade. The emotional toll was devastating, but she remained strong for their children. Jason Hawk passed away on January 28, 2025, at his home in Arkansas, surrounded by family and friends. He was 49 years old. Mary shared Jason's final wishes. He didn't want a formal funeral. He wanted a memorial celebration under the stars, beside a fire, surrounded by the people he loved. A gathering that reflected who he truly was. A private memorial was scheduled for June 7, 2025, at the family homestead in Arkansas. So what did family and friends discover when they entered Jason Hawk's forge after his passing? What unthinkable truth lay hidden in that workshop? What they found in the forge. When Jason's family and close friends stepped into the forge that first evening, the air felt different. Not eerie, not dangerous, just heavy with meaning. You know when you walk into a room someone lived their entire life in, and you can almost feel the echo of their presence? That's what hit them first. The place didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused, like Jason had just stepped out for a minute to cool off a blade or check on the kids. The forge still carried the smell of steel and oil, that warm metallic scent that sticks to your clothes and doesn't let go. The workbench had faint smudges of the last project he touched. A half-empty coffee mug sat off to the side, like he'd planned to come back for one more sip. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was about to walk in and say, "Hand me that hammer over there." But then the emotions crept in. Quiet at first, then overwhelming. This wasn't just a workspace. This was Jason's mind, laid out in tools and steel. The journals were the biggest surprise. They weren't dramatic or poetic. They were meticulous. Detailed sketches, measurements, failed attempts, successful methods, corrections written in the margins. Some entries were written in shaky handwriting, evidence of days when the illness was winning, but Jason's determination refused to tap out. One page had a simple sentence tucked between technical notes. "Try again tomorrow." That one hit the hardest. Then there were the prototype blades, some wrapped carefully in cloth, others resting openly on the bench. They showed where he had been headed creatively. New patterns, new handle ideas, little experiments that only made sense inside the mind of someone who lived and breathed forging.
It's really an all-purpose steel. I mean, when you go back to knives of this age, it was your hunting knife.
Each half-finished blade felt like a conversation he didn't get to finish. Raw materials were labeled, stacked, and stored with almost obsessive precision. Different steels sorted by carbon content. Woods for handles marked with dates. Leather cut and punched for sheaths he never got to stitch. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't a mystery. It was a craftsman leaving breadcrumbs for anyone who knew how to interpret them. They found tools arranged with purpose and precision. Every hammer positioned where Jason's hand would naturally reach for it. Every file, every grinding belt, every quenching tank placed not randomly, but as part of a system refined over decades of practice. The workshop itself was a testament to efficiency born from experience. And tucked in a drawer, they found photos of students through the years, smiling beside their first knife, standing proudly with the blades they forged under Jason's guidance. Some photos had notes on the back, promising, "Keep pushing him." Naturally gifted, determined, just needs confidence. It was his whole teaching philosophy and snapshots. Thank you notes from bladesmiths he'd mentored. Evidence of a man who had dedicated his life not just to creating blades, but to creating bladesmiths. Not just to mastering a craft, but to ensuring that craft would survive him. He'd been forging a legacy that couldn't rust, couldn't break, couldn't be lost, as long as people remembered what he taught them. Nothing in that forge was frightening, scandalous, or even surprising, but it was unthinkable in a different way, because it made everyone realize just how much thought, discipline, and heart Jason put into every inch of his life's work. The forge wasn't a workshop, it was a time capsule, a museum of a man who lived deliberately. And when they finally stepped outside and closed the door, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full, like the walls themselves were holding the memory of a man who never stopped creating, even when life gave him every reason to quit. When the forge grows cold and the hammer falls silent, what remains? What survives when the craftsman can no longer create? The legacy in steel and spirit. The blades remain, hundreds of them scattered across the country in the hands of hunters, collectors, and outdoorsmen. Each one still holds an edge. Each one still carries Jason's maker's mark from Outlaw Forge Works. Each one continues to do the job it was designed for, testament to work done right the first time. But more than the blades, the knowledge endures. Bladesmiths Jason trained are now training others. Techniques he shared at winter count and wood smoke gatherings are being passed to the next generation. His television appearances continue introducing new viewers to the craft, inspiring some to pick up hammer and steel for the first time. Online forums dedicated to bladesmithing still reference his work. Questions about technique often include, what would Jason Hawk do? His approaches to specific challenges, his solutions to common problems, his innovations within traditional methods all remain part of the collective knowledge that modern bladesmiths draw upon. His family carries on his memory. Mary, Kamui, River, and Madeline hold the stories, the lessons, the example of a man who chose to live deliberately, who mastered his craft through decades of dedicated work, who faced his final challenge with courage and grace. The bladesmithing community remembers him not just for his skill, but for his generosity, his willingness to help newcomers, his belief that the craft was bigger than any individual. They remember his authenticity. He lived according to his values without compromise or apology. His father, Jim, who died in May 2016, didn't live to see all of Jason's television success or the full scope of his influence. But Jim had given Jason something invaluable, the example of a man who reinvented himself, who adopted a name that meant something to him, who valued skill and craftsmanship. Jason carried those lessons forward. The unthinkable truth. The unthinkable discovery in Jason Hawk's forge wasn't something mysterious or supernatural. It was something far more profound and far more real. They discovered that a single life, lived with purpose and dedication, creates ripples that extend far beyond that life's end. That true legacy isn't measured in steel, but in the lives you touch and the knowledge you share. That the most permanent thing a craftsman can create isn't a blade, it's another craftsman. Jason Hawk proved that in an age of mass production and disposability, there's still room for quality, for craftsmanship, for work done with care and attention. That the connection between maker and material, between hand and tool, between intention and creation, retains its power and meaning. Every time someone chooses a handmade blade over a factory product, they're voting for the values Jason represented. Every time a young person decides to learn a traditional craft, to develop real skill rather than settling for superficial competence, they're honoring his memory. Every time a craftsman shares knowledge freely, helping a newcomer avoid mistakes, they're following Jason's example.
And with the greatest respect to the Hamon, we're going to turn it into something special.
Craftsmanship that sustained his family for 3 generations.
The forge fire Jason Hawk tended has been passed to others now. It burns in workshops across the country, from mountain forges to desert smithies. It burns in the hearts of everyone who believes there's still value in making things, in developing mastery, in honoring tradition while pushing the craft forward. Today, when a hunter fields a blade forged with care and skill, when a craftsman approaches work with reverence and attention, when someone chooses quality over convenience, Jason Hawk's legacy lives on, not in mystery or mythology, but in honest work, in the ring of hammer on anvil, in the glow of heated steel, in the satisfaction of work done well, in knowledge passed from one generation to the next. The blades remain, the knowledge endures, and the inspiration continues. And somewhere, in a workshop lit by forge fire, a bladesmith is heating steel, preparing for the next hammer blow, continuing the work that craftsmen like Jason Hawk dedicated their lives to perfecting. What they found in Jason Hawk's forge was unthinkable, not because it was strange or mysterious, but because it was beautiful and true. They found proof that one life lived with purpose can echo through generations. They found that the greatest blade a master smith can forge is the next generation of smiths. They found that legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you put into motion. Jason Hawk may be gone, but that forge he left behind, it's still speaking through every journal entry, every blade in progress, every student he lifted up. You can see exactly what he spent his life building. It wasn't fame, it wasn't attention, it was legacy, shaped by fire, guided by purpose, and rooted in love for the craft. And that's the real unthinkable truth. The kind of impact he made doesn't fade. It keeps working, the same way steel remembers every hammer strike. If you learned something new about Jason Hawk today, or felt connected to his story in a way you didn't expect, go ahead and hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe. There's more to uncover, more stories to tell, and I'll be right here walking you through every one of them.